So if you disagree with the idea, is that the same as discrimination? Stay with us here on World Have Your Say.
I experience.
People are going to want to know. Let's just say something.
Welcome back to the programme. Let me introduce you to the guests who are joining us now. Rory O'Neill, aka Panty Bliss, is an activist and drag performer in Dublin. We will see a video of him speaking in a couple of moments. Brandon Ambrosino is a writer in Baltimore, and we're also joined by Caroline Farrow, who is a member of Catholic Voices from our Brighton studio. But first of all, we're going to play you part of a video put up online speaking as Panty Bliss. Rory put that video up about homophobia in Ireland. It's had more than 500,000 views on YouTube, and it started a debate. Let's have a listen.
And for the last 3 weeks, I have been lectured to by heterosexual people about what homophobia is and about who is allowed to identify it. Straight people have lined up, ministers, senators, barristers, journalists have lined up to tell me what homophobia is and to tell me what I am allowed to feel oppressed by. People who have never experienced homophobia in their lives, people who have never checked themselves at a pedestrian crossing, have told me that unless I am being thrown into prison or herded onto a cattle truck, then it is not homophobia, and that feels oppressive. And so now, Irish gay people, we find ourselves in this ludicrous situation where we are not only not allowed to say publicly what we feel oppressed by, we're not even allowed to think it, because the very definition, our definition, has been disallowed by our betters. And for the last 3 weeks, I've been denounced from the floor of the Oireachtas to newspaper columns to the seething morass of internet commentary, denounced for using hate speech because I dare to use the word homophobia. And a jumped-up queer like me should know that the word homophobia is no longer available to gay people, which is a spectacular and neat Orwellian trick, because now it turns out that gay people are not the victims of homophobia. Homophobes are the victims of homophobia.
And that was Panty Bliss. As I say, that video going up online, over 500,000 views on that. Rory, I'll bring you in. It was interesting watching Brandon's face during that. He was smiling during some of it. But Rory, I've watched that whole 10-minute video, which is up on YouTube, and you did sound quite emotional at times. Your voice was shaking. Did you find it a difficult thing to talk about on that stage in front of all of those people?
Well, I think it's always difficult to try and express your personal emotions in a public context. But I think as a gay person living an everyday life here in Ireland, and I think it's in common with gay people around the world, we constantly have to deal with these small psychic cuts, this sort of low level of homophobia. And we're somehow expected to just accept that, this low level of homophobia. And people sort of point at us and say, well, what are you complaining about? You know, you're not living in Russia, as if that makes it okay. And I just don't think it's okay.
Let's bring in Brandon, who's a writer in Baltimore, and you've written a piece for The Atlantic that's saying that being against gay marriage is not homophobic. For people who haven't seen that article, just outline your thoughts, if you would.
Sure. I think right now the word homophobia is being used, and quite rightly it is used of some people, but it's being used too broadly, I think, and it demonizes or it vilifies everybody who has any sort of reservation about gay marriage. And I would just like to open up the conversation. I think when we throw out a label like homophobia, we sort of stop the discussion before we can even have it. And I would want to open up the discussion.
Well, let me introduce you to Caroline Farrow, who's also with us. And Caroline, after you've answered this, I'm keen for the three of you to have a conversation, and I'll very much sit back. But Caroline, what are your thoughts on this? The idea that if you are against gay marriage, you are in fact homophobic?
I would agree with what Brendan, I think, was just saying, that no, if you're against gay marriage, it's because you, the way you view marriage, you view marriage as very much a child-centric organisation. And having a view on what marriage is and what consists of marriage does not in any way encompass any hatred or dislike or extreme aversion to gay people, far from it. And I think to try and reframe it as being an unkind or spiteful motivation is really unhelpful. It seeks to shut down the debate.
Well, I would agree with Caroline there if being against gay marriage were somehow of no consequence to gay people. But, you know, campaigning against gay marriage and not allowing gay people to get married does have real consequences in the real world. It stops gay people, you know, having full access to the legal protections of their families. It affects the children being raised by gay couples, and gay couples, of course, are raising children whether or not people like Caroline want them to. That is a fact of life. And being against gay marriage is actually affecting those children every day in a real and, you know, actual way. But
I think the point that we're trying to make here, Rory, is, and I would agree with you, and actually, believe it or not, the Catholic Church would agree with you here, nobody should suffer unjust discrimination or any, you know, unjust discrimination on account of their sexuality. You know, the Vatican and the Catechism, the Catholic teaching is really, really clear on that. And so where, obviously the situation in the UK has been a little bit different, where you are not receiving equal rights, whether that be inheritance rights, employment rights, whatever those rights may be, of course you should have them and of course you are entitled to them. But this is about marriage being a child-centric, institution, and therefore, where I think you would be better placed, instead of saying, well, you know, we want marriage, just what are the rights you want and why? And if marriage is just about love, if marriage is purely about feeling for each other and adults, then why do you need the state to mandate your relationship? You know, romantic relationships should be nobody's business.
Well, I think the day when most people get married, they don't sort of say, I do, and only think about having children. Marriage is a much broader institution than that, that takes into, you know, account the feelings of people on a much deeper level than simply a desire to have children. But even if you want to reduce marriage to simply being about children, and I certainly would not do that, but even if I were to do that just for the sake of argument, you are still, by not allowing gay couples to get married, you are hurting actual children now.
How would you say that children are being hurt? Because surely what is best for children is that they have, where is at all possible, that they have a loving mother and a loving father. You know, where there is a child, there is a mother and a father somewhere. Nobody is saying that gay people are incapable of being good parents, and anyone that does should actually be shut down or rebuked for that. No one's saying that gay people, sexuality makes you a bad parent, but what we are saying is that where possible, children should be raised by their biological parents, by their mother and their father, and therefore when you start saying marriage is just about two people in love, and therefore you know, as long as children have anybody that, you know, two people who love them, that actually deprives children of a fundamental right, and that's to their biological mother and their biological father.
Well,
so,
first of all, I would say that is yes, Brandon, sorry.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we're seeing to get it back on track is, you know, if we were to say, well, Caroline is homophobic, we would shut down the conversation. But now by actually having a conversation with her, we're hearing her concerns and we're able to actually engage in a meaningful way. So I can take on the claim about, you know, marriage being a child-centric institution. And then we've gone from this very base discussion of my feelings are hurt to getting to the real heart of the issue, which is, what is the purpose of marriage? Is there a purpose to marriage? Then we're into philosophy and we're talking about the word nature. Then we're talking about utility and design. So as we're seeing just in these brief moments, I mean, this is so much bigger than the word homophobia. And I would love if our conversations went the way that they're going right now, rather than you're homophobia, you're homophobic, you're wrong, stop talking. This is a great discussion.
And
I just think it's incredible that the word homophobia has become so loaded, and even people who take homophobic positions are absolutely terrified to be called homophobic. Well, but the truth is that we live in a homophobic culture, and all of us are affected by that sort of, you know, deeply ingrained prejudice against gay people. It's just normal and standard because we've grown up in that society. And I think it's wonderful that people take offense to be called homophobic, because they should. But I would hope that instead of freaking out about it, that they would just examine their own internal dialogue and ask themselves, why are they taking this position against gay equality? I would suggest that really what it boils down to is homophobia within you. I mean, I think that's honestly the way it is. And I think it's a perfectly fair word. The very man who invented the word was a heterosexual man, and he, to this day, is vociferously arguing for it to be, kept in use and to allow gay people to call homophobia when they see it. The word was designed and coined to allow gay people to say, the problem isn't with us, the problem is with you.
But right. I'm not saying that we should throw out the word. I'm not saying let's throw out the word altogether, but I'm saying, do we have to be so quick to use it? I think that there certainly are people. I mean, in my country, we have the Westboro Baptist Church. Those people are hateful and bigoted and discriminatory. And if we want to use the word anti-gay or homophobic, we can apply it there. And I wouldn't have a problem with applying it there. But to use the same word of the Westboro Baptist Church and to apply that to Caroline, or to apply that to my parents, or to apply that to Pope Francis himself, seems a little bit absurd to me.
Well, Brandon, for a writer, you seem to have a very reductive idea of what words are. Words have degrees to them. And, is somebody who lynches a black person racist? Yes. But is somebody who also chooses to serve a white woman at the counter of their deli before a black woman racist? Yes, that is also a racist person. Obviously, it's a different degree of racism, and I would say that the same applies to homophobia. You can be extremely homophobic and violently homophobic, or you can be casually homophobic. And I think people who are against gay marriage simply because of the sexuality of the people involved are homophobic.
No,
it doesn't mean you're the worst person in the world.
No, I don't think that's true, Rory.
Person. You could be a beautiful person in many other ways, but you do have a discomfort with gay people.
But Rory, can you listen for a moment? Basically, in the UK last year, we had a survey, as I'm sure you know, of gay people who were in favour or who were against gay marriage. Now, interestingly enough, only 50% of the LGBT community who were surveyed were in favour, 25% were against, and the other 25% weren't really sure. So there was not a strong consensus, and I don't think it's fair to accuse either the gay people who were against gay marriage, because they said, well, why should we conform to heterosexual norms, of being in some way hating themselves, and also, from my perspective...
That's absolutely fine. I don't believe that anybody needs to get gay married, and there are plenty of gay people who don't agree with marriage as an institution
but they
in
are
itself,
not,
and they're not
homophobic.
That's perfectly valid.
But they're not homophobic for
But their
doing
argument
so.
isn't against gay marriage. Their argument is against marriage, and there are straight people who will make that same marriage argument as well. You can be against marriage and not be homophobic. That's fine. Go for it. But I'm just saying that there are plenty of gay people who do want to get married, and they should be allowed because they are equal citizens. A gay British citizen or American citizen or Irish citizen is equal in every way by virtue of citizenship as a heterosexual one, and should be treated exactly the same. They pay the same taxes, they buy yogurt in the same shops, they take the same tube trains. They are citizens and should be treated the same.
No, and of course that's right. But the thing is, with marriage, anyway. Well, I mean, to come back to your original point, if we go back to what sparked this whole row off, for example, I know Breda and I know Dave, and I know that they are the most loving and generous and kind people. And when you say
there are also some terrible ones. Don't worry.
But when you say to somebody you are homophobic, actually what you're saying is your motivation.
Caroline, I'm just going to jump in here because for people watching all around the world, they're not going to be clear on this. What originally started this was a conversation on RTE television between Rory and some other commentators, and various accusations were made to one another. In the end, it turned out that RTE made a payout. So we're going to steer well clear of that, because we don't want to get involved in any legal problems. So but just as a bit of context, I wanted people around the world to be aware of that.
What I wanted to say was that in common with those people, I'm opposed to gay marriage, but I hate to use the old canard, I have gay friends, but genuinely we do. We have gay friends, and we have gay couples as friends. We invited and we're really delighted to welcome gay couples to our wedding. Now, that is not the action of somebody who hates gay people or who wishes to exclude them their rights. What we're saying is that marriage always has conditions attached to it. You have age conditions. You can't marry close blood relatives. You must be of sound mind. And the other condition is you must be a male and female. So marriage always has a set of conditions attached to it. And what we're not saying you should be denied your legal rights, your basic legal rights, because of your sexuality. Of course not. But what we are saying is that marriage is a child-centric institution, and that is the reason why a man and a woman should always enter it. It's nothing to do with hatred or dislike or contempt. Far from it. And it's so hurtful. I know you might say, well, get over it, but it's so hurtful, because you're saying to us, in effect, you're a hypocrite because you hate us and you dislike us and you want to do us harm. And
I'm
actually,
not saying you hate me. I'm saying you're uncomfortable about what you think I do. What this is really about is the reduction of gay people from being people who are to being people who do. You see gay people as people who do gayness rather than people who happen to be and are gay. And because if you accept that people just are gay, that is it's part of who we are, then you should have no objection to us being who we are and expressing that through marriage like everybody else.
But then again, it's to do with identity, isn't it? You know, yes. we say that, certainly from a Christian perspective, we say that there is so much more to our identity than our sexual preferences. You know, there's so much more to me, I would hope, than somebody
Caroline,
who chooses...
You're totally welcome to that view as a Christian. I'm not asking to get Christian married. You know, I think you're perfectly entitled to that view. I may not like it, but you know, it's your view, and I'm happy for you to have it if you want
Rory,
to. But I'm not looking for Christian blessing. I'm looking for you know, a civil marriage to be just treated the same way under the civil law as everybody else.
Rory, Brandon, I know you're desperate to get in. We've got to take a quick break, Brandon, so we will come straight back to Brandon to carry on with this fascinating conversation in a few minutes' time.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something. No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Welcome back to World Have Your Say. We're discussing whether it's homophobic to be against gay marriage. Lots of you getting in touch with us from around the world. So Tetsi in South Africa via WhatsApp says gay rights are human rights. Religious people must stop paraphrasing the world's oldest book because their interpretation is the root of negative stereotypes. Meanwhile, Mohammed in Frankfurt on Facebook says this is not about human rights. This is about keeping things in order. Tolerating such acts will eventually deteriorate any nation. We're still joined by Rory O'Neill, Brandon Ambrosini and Caroline Farrow. And Brandon, you were trying to get involved before we went to the break, so by all means make your point.
Yeah, so Rory sees a difference between what people do and what people are, or he alluded to that. I think that's really important. One of my models for life and in writing is Martin Luther King, and one of his principles of nonviolent resistance is we need to differentiate between evil and the evildoer, so we have to find a way to condemn evil without condemning the evildoer. And when we use the word homophobia, what we're doing is we're condemning both. We're going, not only is it wrong logically to argue against gay marriage, but it's also a moral flaw. And I think that we have to be able to separate the two. Somebody can be intellectually wrong and still have good intentions about that.
I don't disagree with that at all.
I also think that there's too much emphasis upon what people do. Actually, most of us do not care what other people get up to in the bedroom. You know, and in fact, the church itself has said people should be able to choose their own private acts of morality. These things should not be criminalised, and therefore we aren't. It is. I think there's a lot of projection going on here. We're not saying, oh, these horrible gay people, how vile, how disgusting what they get up to. That's not the point, you know. And nobody, well, certainly nobody I know has that attitude. This is for us to do with society and the common good and a wider principle, and it's not a question of trying to deprive anybody of any civil rights that they should have.
Well, you say that's not a question, but that is in effect what you are doing when you campaign against equality for gay people.
But do you think marriage is a civil right? Do you think?
Yes,
do you think
I think civil marriage is a civil right.
But why do you want the state to recognise your private romantic
relationship. The same reason that everybody else does. There are obviously practical implications to do with, you know, succession and property rights, hospital visiting rights, all of those things. But language is also important, as we know from this discussion over the word homophobia. And I believe that the
Rory,
state should recognise my relation the same as everybody else.
Hugely frustrating, but Rory, Caroline and Brandon, thank you so much for joining us on World Have Your Say. We'll carry on talking about this on the BBC World Service in a couple of hours' time.